Final seconds of the game, a chance to score, and the chance has gone begging. If your business's commerce platform keeps missing the target on golden opportunities, get the MVP you deserve. Get Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're a garage entrepreneur or IPO ready, Shopify is the only tool that you need to start, run, and grow your business without the struggle. Shopify puts you in control of every sales channel. So whether you're selling signed football boots from Shopify's in-person POS system, or you're vending vintage shirts on Shopify's all-in-one e-commerce platform, you are covered. And once you've reached your audience, Shopify has the internet's best converting checkout to help you turn them from browsers to buyers. What I love about Shopify is how, no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. And Shopify is truly a global force, powering Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across over 170 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to take your business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
Dougie,
Sam.
it's time to talk about Tottenham.
Ange Postecoglou, mate.
Yeah,
I've had enough. You know, we go on and like, oh yeah, the football's great. Is it? All I'm watching is a Tottenham team that I've watched a million times before. It's nothing special.
There's more positives than negatives, and you know I like what Ange is doing, and going from where Potts was, and then we've had Mourinho, we've had Conte, which I don't think any of us enjoyed watching that football.
When can we stop pretending that this bloke knows what he's doing and tell the truth? That Postecoglou is an inept manager, woefully out of his depth. Someone else needs to be in charge of this football.
He's had 14 managers in 23 years. That's nearly a manager every year and a half. Something has to
He's not making the right decision if he's changing
exactly. That's what I'm saying, and it's never him.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of The Truth. Back in the host's chair, and it is literally a host's chair this week thanks to a studio reconfiguration. It's me, Sam Tighe, and taking the co-host reins once again is Dougie. Hello Dougie.
Hello, Sam. Great to be back with you.
Yeah, nice to be in person. A couple of online records.
It's not quite the same.
It's just
very COVID-y.
It's just not the same. We don't like it at all, but we do what we have to. And of course, hello to the voice of God, our producer, Jack Collins.
Hello, Sam. How you doing?
I've had better days, but we won't go into that. Other than that, I'm very happy because Villa have got themselves back on the winning trail. They play Leipzig tonight as we record, so we're yet to see what happens, but we didn't lose last week to Southampton. We didn't lose to Brentford last week. We actually won. And
weird, no mention of the Lions this week.
Oh, that's just normal. That's
you can't have it all.
No, we won as well.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 12-1.
Oh,
yeah, 11
incredible.
wins. Look, Dougie, you asked at the end of our therapy session last week that in return that we would restore Sunderland's form.
Yes.
You won at the weekend, didn't you?
We did. Much needed.
Yeah.
2 goals from Tommy Watson, who is the new messiah in our mix. No, we've got 4 academy graduates that are playing.
Tommy Watson.
Tommy Watson,
I know. Duncan Watmore's stepbrother.
He's from County Durham, and he is one of 4 local lads in our starting 11. Every week since Romain Mundle, who we signed from Spurs, got injured. And yeah, 2 crucial goals against Stoke. Look, we hadn't won since the end of October, so it was really, really needed. We're still in the hunt for the playoffs. I'm not going to get too excited. I don't think we'll go up automatically, but it was good to win.
Well, promise fulfilled.
Thank you.
Because you did indeed win. Of course, you played tonight. We don't know how that goes. So by the time this comes out, you might have lost again. Same as Villa. Anyway, on we go. A little PSA to start with. Following this episode, so from next week, we will be carrying a slightly more continental flavour. Our producer, Jack, flagged that we've been a bit Premier League heavy to begin with. To be fair, it has been the most chaotic of seasons with many, many talking points. But from next week, we will start to branch out over the continent. It might be Kylian Mbappe next week.
It might be. Who is having a very divisive season. Yeah. So it would be a very good topic for this podcast.
Yeah, that would be. Maybe we'll do that. Maybe. We'll see. But this week, we are talking Tottenham. And I'm going to begin with a commiseratory, that's a hard word to say, shout out to Aaron on Instagram, who DM'd me last week with a very simple message. And it read, Spurs episode next week. is going to break me. Perhaps it will. Let's find out.
Oh, we'll try our best, Aaron.
Let's talk about Spurs. Dougie, very hot topic. Hotter than I really had anticipated it being coming into the Christmas period. Spurs are all over the place, obviously. Absolute carnage. Carnage at the weekend. Carnage generally. A team that recently beat Aston Villa 4-0 and Manchester City 4-0 is having to fend off question marks over the security of their manager, Ange Postecoglou's job. How the hell are we here?
Yeah, it's been a really difficult start to the season for them. I say difficult. It's just been really inconsistent, like more so than I would have ever expected at this stage of the Ange Postecoglou era. They sit 11th as we record this. They are 7 points off 4th place Man City, so not completely outside the reckoning for some form of European football, but they're also only 7 points above 17th place Crystal Palace. They lost to Chelsea 4-3 at the weekend in a scoreline that I think really flattered them, to be totally honest. Like, if it's not for those Cucurella slips in the first 20 minutes, where Spurs were actually playing very well, but the gap between the two sides in terms of intensity, organisation, ingenuity on the ball, I thought was pretty vast from 20 minutes to 90 minutes.
And Son's goal at the end made it look a bit closer than it really was, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And they were shooting themselves in the foot, like 2 penalties given away, 2 deserved penalties given away. And that was the 11th time that they've lost a Premier League game, having been 2 goals ahead, the most out of any side in the competition's history. And they've now lost 7 league games this season. They only lost 12 in the entirety of last season, and only Ipswich, Wolves, Southampton and West Ham have lost more Premier League games this campaign, which is not great company to be in. They've lost to Newcastle, Arsenal, Brighton, Palace, Ipswich, Bournemouth and Chelsea. So there are some sides in there that you'd expect to be and around their level, but for the only side to lose to Ipswich Town so far this season, the only side to lose to Palace up until Palace then played Ipswich, this is really quite troubling. And they've got an EFL Cup quarter-final coming up against Man United on the 19th of December. And they've only lost 1 of their 5 Europa League games to date. So there is an opportunity to end that much talked about trophy hoodoo. But with the way they're playing at the moment, you'd again not be confident that they're going to go too much further in either competition. So for a man that brought so much hope and such a magnificent start to his first campaign, it feels like once again we are approaching or are already at a bit of a crossroads with Ange Postecoglou.
Yeah, they've lost more games than they've won in the Premier League, which is, yeah, it's not just an early season quirk. We're 15 games in and they've lost 7 and they've won 6. It doesn't really make sense, because if you think of Tottenham at their best, even this season, they've absolutely run over teams. Like, I think of, obviously, Villa falling foul of just an incredible display, them absolutely blitzing Manchester City. They went to Old Trafford and did the business. Kulusevski putting in one of the best performances, individual performances of the Premier League season altogether, I think, that day. At their best, they are absolutely incredible. And yet, they're far worse than the sum of their parts more often than they are at their absolute best, which is really confusing and probably the reason as to why it has provoked a very extreme reaction from some fans towards Ange Postecoglou. You would not think, based on the highlight reel and based on the general quality of their best football, that this would be a man who is being, screamed at, personally screamed at an away loss to Bournemouth. You know, there's a group of fans there. I hate it so much. We all hate this. I don't buy the I pay my money, I have the right to say what I want to say. There's a group of fans there at the end of the Tottenham's away loss to Bournemouth last midweek, and they're provoking him and filming his reaction, trying to get a rise out of him, and it's not good enough. But nevertheless, that reaction has been provoked. So whatever Tottenham are doing here in terms of rising and falling and showing a lack of consistency is really provoking something very visceral among the fans. This isn't just being a bit cold on a manager. This isn't like a contrarian Liverpool fan going, well, you know, Klopp's not all that. This is quite serious. Like, the reaction to him and to the team recently has been very, very visceral and quite violent, actually, in terms of its negativity, which, again, it's so difficult to marry up sometimes when you watch them at their absolute best. That 11 minutes against Chelsea, they ran them over. They were unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable, but the way it unravelled, and for the 2 centre-backs to go off injured in the way they do, I thought this really summed them up. Christian Romero appears to pull his groin while executing like a drag turn in his own box. And then Mickey van der Ven, it was very surprising to see him in that starting lineup.
Felt a bit forced, didn't it?
I mean, he pulled his hamstring after 80 minutes or so.
There is talk that one's not as serious as the Romero one.
I mean, let's hope, because apparently Romero is 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So Van der Ven can't be 6 weeks either. Otherwise, this season's going to go down the pan. But how often does Van der Ven pull up, and did they rush him back and only to get caught short? A bit like a Michael Olise situation from last season when you're in that desperate situation. Very, very tough to watch, but the fragility is so clear. And even when they were 2-0 up, and even before Sancho's first goal, which was the 18th minute, so there's a 7-minute gap there. There were probably 3 chances for Chelsea before they even got one back. Incredible to watch, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was lucky enough to be there working for Sky, and it was interesting seeing the reaction. So I was standing next to, I think it's called the South Bank, their sort of Dortmund style.
Yes, South Bank, yeah.
Dortmund style
South stand.
stand.
Sorry, South stand.
South stand. And yeah, the South Bank's a bit different actually. Yeah, pick up your coffees and go to an art gallery
the
there.
sun as the sun.
Yeah, exactly. At the bottom of the South stand, and I was next to where the Chelsea players were taking corners, and I've never felt more involved in what is a pretty heated fixture, to say the least.
Yes.
And some would say stupid. They stupidly gave out these like placards to Tottenham fans before the game started during the light show, so they could hold them up. And yeah, it must have revealed some sort of lettering or some sort of message. And those
you
were...
didn't see what it was.
No. And there was, whatever it is, 40,000 people in that stand, maybe a bit less. No, it can't be as many as that. 30,000 people in that stand, throwing those things in unison at every Chelsea player, taking every corner. And I was caught in the middle. I was ducking, weaving, bobbing. And yeah, my bald head took a few of them. But that is a side note to what was an interesting atmosphere, because I thought, particularly in the final 30 minutes or so, I was like, oh, I think this could get a bit nasty. And to be fair, most Spurs fans at where I was standing were complaining, at the referee, which I think is just one of those classic things you do when you're losing, and you're like, I'm going to blame anyone. But they were also complaining that Spurs weren't going for it enough. And I was like, the last thing that this performance showed me is that Spurs didn't go for it enough. You know, it is that constant, do they press on with the accelerator far too much? And it's not just a recent this season thing. You know, as I already talked about, they got off to that flying start last season, won 8 of their first 10 league games, but then they lost 12 of their next 26 to finish 5th. But having said that, they never dropped lower than 5th all season. They're actually only 2 points off Aston Villa at the end of the last season. And that was 3 places higher and 6 points better off than the previous campaign, despite losing Harry Kane. And you looked at what they did in the summer, and they had a net spend of just under £80 million. Not massive, but actually it was quite an interesting summer. It wasn't particularly high spending. That was actually the 10th highest in Europe, and it was the 5th highest in the Premier League, behind Brighton, Ipswich, United, and West Ham. So the sides that you wouldn't expect really to finish above Spurs, maybe United, this season. They brought in Dominic Solanke, 21 goals last season in all competitions, 19 in the Premier League. And alongside that, Archie Gray, Wilson Odobert and Lucas Bergvall, who have started 3 league games between them. So did they make enough strides, Sam, in the summer to close the gap on those above them? And did they make enough inroads in the summer to address the obvious flaws in their squad, where if they had a few players injured last year, particularly Van der Ven and Romero, their form dramatically dropped off? And at the moment, with Vicario out with a broken ankle, with Bentancur out as well, it feels like their replacements at CDM in Yves Bissouma, who seems to have a clanger every 5 games or so, and Fraser Forster, who I don't think is a bad shot stopper, but is not very good with his feet whatsoever and feels like a bit of a liability to this entire system. Do you think they did enough in the summer to strengthen the squad and give Ange enough materials to improve this team, or should he be doing better with the players he's got available?
Yeah, so this is the really, really important question, because it basically addresses expectation of this Spurs squad. So whenever you're angry with a team or you're happy with a team, it's always according to expectation, right? You're overperforming, underperforming. And if you're upset with what you're watching from Spurs at the moment, it's probably because you thought you were going to be taking a step forward off the back of last season. As you illustrated, they did pretty well, you know, pretty close to the top 4. An improvement in terms of placings on the previous season. You want to keep improving. You want to keep getting better and better. The summer business did not look like they were trying to take that next step. As you did one of the Sky Sports Transfer Talk podcast at the end of the summer, and Dan Kilpatrick was sat next to me, a Spurs reporter. And Pete Graves, the host, asked Dan, so what do you think of Spurs putting themselves in the title mix? And Dan said, this has stayed with me literally since August. He's like, well, Spurs seem to think they're in it, but their business doesn't look like they think they're in it, because they've invested really well in really good young players, but it's teenagers, it's kids. These are not players that you are signing to ramp it up and go next step. This is a long-term project. This is Lucas Bergwall could be one of the best midfielders in the world one day. Let's pick him up early. Let's see how it goes. Archie Gray looks fantastic. Let's invest in him. Plays most of his football on a Thursday night at right back at the moment. You know, he's finding his way, but he's not really a factor. Odebear, injury has played a part, but also, you know, his best position is left wing. That's where the captain Son plays. Spurs did not load up on players here for a title tilt. They did their summer business and their activity over the course of the summer did not suggest to me that they thought they were taking a next step at all. So I can't necessarily understand. I mean, I guess the frustration is it's frustrating that they're not taking that step. I can't help but think that that's not really Postecoglou's fault. It's not like he sat there going, no, don't sign any more players. I'm fine. Lucas Bergwall, Archie Gray, yeah, we'll get over the line with that. That's top 3 material. No one is saying that. The manager is not saying that. So that, unfortunately, is a decision that's come from above. The half of the fan base that aren't annoyed at Ange are probably annoyed at Daniel Levy and ENIC. And I'm starting to think that the aggression is probably more suitably placed on the right-hand side there to ENIC than it is to Postecoglou, because, you know, Ange, after the Chelsea game, found these comments really interesting. He was asked about, you know, the situation, and I'm going to read you the quote. It's a tough moment because there are all these tools you could possibly use as a manager when you are going through tough moments to turn things around, and our limited resources from a playing perspective at the moment doesn't allow us to do so you have to find other ways. The players are constantly out there because we can't rotate. They're giving everything they can. It diminishes performances as well because they need a rest, but we can't give them a rest. So there it is. Cards on the table from Ange ahead of January, possibly interestingly timed, being it a transfer window, but also just trying to explain himself a little bit here. Spurs are super up and down. 50% of that to me is they are a very young squad. Young players are pretty volatile. They're inconsistent. The other 50% is they're absolutely knackered. They are so tired. And sometimes it just doesn't click into gear.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to just hammer their summer business, because at the same time, you know, Dominic Solanke, I think, was the most expensive Premier League signing of the summer. You know, they waited a long £65 million. You know, that is no short amount. And I don't think he's played badly whatsoever.
I think he's really good.
I think he's been very solid. Yeah. And given the fact he had an injury, he didn't score for his first couple of games, then had an injury, and already were people being like, oh, this guy, you know, have they signed? Is Bournemouth number 9 good enough for
He missed a
Spurs?
good one against Leicester in the opening weekend. And immediately people were like, oh. Yeah. But you know what it's like.
It's not like Premier League fans to overreact.
Yeah, no, not at all. He's actually been magnificent, I think. He has a huge impact on the way they play, not just in terms of finishing, because they've got goals from all sorts of places, right? He leads the line really well. He presses really well. I think he's been a really good pickup. I was going to say astute then, but you can't really make an astute signing for £65 million. Like, the secret's out. He's a good player. But without him, they have been... You know, they've really struggled at times. And you made the point about the squad depth a little bit there and who can come in. And, you know, it's not just Solanke. Like, okay, if Solanke's not fit, who can they play out front? They don't really have anyone, because Richarlison apparently he just doesn't. He looks physically very troubled nowadays. Son is also... He's past his peak. Son,
I think that's fair to say.
I think it's fair.
I put that on Twitter this week, though, and there was a lot of backlash pointing out his creativity, but just watching him in the flesh on Sunday, it was inevitable. Look, this guy's played regularly since the age of 20, picking up very few major injuries, to be honest. And it's just almost shorter of confidence than anything else, to be honest. And you saw him go through on that one-on-one. That felt like a huge moment, particularly when Spurs weren't playing particularly well. His creative numbers are really solid this season, but his expected goals per 90 is now around the level of Lucas Paquetá, who's not having a particularly good season. It's around the level of Ismail Assar at Crystal Palace, who's not played regularly at all. So these aren't the sort of performances you'd want from, your leader and best player. Some Spurs fans have responded being like, we didn't need to sign Solanke because he looks so good as a 9. I don't think that's a good idea, given the fact he's 32.
I'm not convinced that striker role is not really for Son, not at this point. And yeah, we talked about the kind of almost like a lack of, I say lack of right back depth because Archie Gray deputises there, but they do have Jed Spence. They just don't really use him because he's not really a good fit for the system. That's probably why he was out on loan last year, and probably should be on loan right now because he doesn't get a look in. And they don't have a single left back in this team that can do what Dougie does. So Dougie plays all the games.
He looks knackered at the moment.
He looks exhausted. Bless him. He is one of the few of the first 11, actually, that also has been chiming in quite heavily on the Thursdays. When they play Galatasaray, Doggie's playing, and I'm like, why is he on the pitch? That's mad. The amount of running that he has to get through in his inverted and overlapping, tucked in, but also explosive left-back role that Ange has designed for him. It looks like hard work. And I think he's actually really struggled this season, Dougie, unfortunately. And he definitely hasn't got any better than he was.
Compared to his first season, for sure.
And it's he ended last season injured, bit of fatigue, and now he's just completely overloaded. So Ange there laying it out on the table, these players are tired, and it diminishes performances. To a point, I agree. And you can't really point the finger at him there because he's not in control of the transfers. And again, he's not like he was sat there no, don't sign any more players. I'm fine. I'm happy with this. Of course he wanted more. And Tottenham makes so much money. Every time you see a revenue graphic, top 10 sports franchises in the world, it's all the classics, New York Yankees, and all that. And then the Spurs have started appearing in 9th on that bloody graphic.
Yeah.
But they don't really furnish the squad using that money.
They have still spent a net spend of £450 million over the last 5 years, which is only £10 million less than Arsenal's. Only Chelsea, Man United and Arsenal in that time have spent more in that time frame. So that's over the last 5 years. Over the last 10 years, again, it's the 5th largest. And yes, it's dwarfed by the likes of Chelsea and Man United, and in 10-year period, Man City, who have really tightened up in the last 5 years. But the difficulty is that I think the expectation now, and what people obsess on outside of the club in particular, is the lack of trophies since 2008. And I think that would just be brilliant for every Spurs fan who's listening to this podcast. I'm sure they're nodding their heads, just being like, can we just end that hoodoo? But at the same time,
nice, yeah.
the squad is not built at the moment for a 50-game campaign. Clearly, it's not built for that. It's at the moment, it seems like when you've got your first choice 11 on there, you can match anybody. But 1 or 2 players missing, almost unlike any other top 6 club, and the drop-off is absolutely massive.
I'm not even sure it's linked to 1 or 2 players missing. I think you can get to the point where even the best 11 that Spurs have can step onto the pitch and they could still underperform because they are just that volatile. When they're not hitting those top levels, and by top levels I mean they're literally running you over, you're drowning when you're playing them. If they're 1% off, 2% off, I can't believe how bad they are in comparison.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it, I swear.
It is on a knife edge, isn't it? And I think what Spurs fans that aren't pro-Ange will be pointing out is that this isn't just particularly new. If you take out that first 10 games of last year, their final 28 games of last season, they had the 10th best record in the competition. That was only 2 points better than Everton. You do that across an entire campaign and you end up with 54 points. That would have been good enough for 9th across the entire year. They're on track for 50 points this year. That would be their lowest tally since 2007-8 when they finished 11th under Martin Jol and Juan de Ramos, which incidentally is the last time they won a trophy as well.
All right, so this is all by design.
All by design, yeah. They're just throwing the league away so they can prioritise the Carabao Cup.
The Champions League, Copa Libertadores, the World Cup. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's home ground. Select Quote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, while Select Quote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. And have you ever worried about getting coverage with pre-existing health conditions? Select Quote partners with carriers that provide policies for a variety of health conditions. High blood pressure, diabetes, done your ACL? No problem. Select Quote partners with carriers that can cover those conditions and loads of others. Or, if you don't have any major health issues, they work with carriers that can get you same-day coverage with no medical exam required. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/ranks. Go to selectquote.com/ranks today to get started. That's selectquote.com/ranks.
But they haven't even got particularly close to a trophy in recent years, to be honest. That Champions League final in 2019, the Carabao Cup in 2021, where they fired Mourinho the week of the final.
Yep.
Since then, there's been a semi-final of the EFL Cup. They lost 3-0 in aggregate to Chelsea. They haven't made it past the 5th round of either cup since. And the golden opportunity was surely the Conference League in 21-22. They got knocked out in the Conference League group stage. They lost 3 games against Vitesse. Mura? Do you remember Mura?
No.
Rennes? I mean, no one remembers Mura, but I mean, Spurs fans, I'm sure they do.
Do you remember why the Rennes game? They threw the Rennes game.
They didn't play it on purpose.
They didn't play it. Yeah, in some sort of protest.
No, was it
COVID? I don't know. Something happened.
They literally were like, "No, we're not playing it," and they were out.
Okay. I mean, yeah. It was a shambles. And this season, who've they got in the Carabao Cup quarterfinals? They got Man United, Arsenal, Liverpool, and Newcastle are still in there. They've drawn Tamworth in the FA Cup, so
Tamworth.
You'd expect them to win that. And they've still got Rangers and Hoffenheim to play in the Europa League. So at the moment, it doesn't look like they're necessarily going to automatically qualify for the last 16. Of course, you'd back them in a knockout playoff. So my question, Sam, is do they, despite a huge change in tactics under Ange Postecoglou, look really any closer to ending the trophy hoodoo? And do you think, as a neutral, the trophy hoodoo should really matter? Or are you just more of a purist and you say, look, on our day we can beat anyone, we're clearly going in the right direction on our day? What's your opinion?
Oh, mate. I mean, Spurs and the trophy question, it's how long have we been talking about it?
16 years.
I mean, the way to win trophies in football, but barring strikes of lightning and bits of luck and stuff like that, generally speaking, I feel like the best way you can put yourself into position to win trophies is to consistently improve and be consistently good and put yourself in that position to do so. Spurs jumping up and down like crazy in terms of form isn't particularly helpful. But I can't really argue with like when they hit the right notes, Spurs, when they hit the right note, oh my God, they play some of the best football in the league.
It's so much more watchable.
Like the performance they put in against Manchester City was just overwhelmingly good. The 11 minutes they had against Chelsea was great. And we make a joke that it was only 11 because they collapsed afterwards, but that was them in full flow. If Ange Postecoglou can find a way to unlock that on a more regular basis, they would win trophies. It's on him to figure out how to do that. I believe that a big part of them not being able to do that regularly is the fact that they are such a young team. And they are. Like, I think maybe we forget actually that there's quite a lot of inexperienced parts in this team. Dougie is very, very early into his career. Mickey van der Ven is actually still quite young, but all things considered, they've just brought a host of new young players in. The threat there is that it's not changing anytime soon. They still profile as young. They're going to continue to profile as young, and that's a bit of a worry. But I would be pleased with like the general progression and track if I were a Spurs fan, because yes, sometimes it's painful, but other times it's glorious. And unless you're Man City or Liverpool over the last several years, very often that consistency doesn't bless anybody.
I think there is probably something to be said, though, that Chelsea's starting 11 and subs were younger than Spurs at the weekend. And so this is the point I was going to come to. I was going to talk about the fact that, did you see what happened to Tamworth celebrations when they drew Spurs? There's a bunch of 9-year-olds just running around shouting Tottenham get battered. Which is
the reason I said go on Tamworth, by the way, was not an anti-Spurs. When I was born in Birmingham, my parents lived in Tamworth for 4 years.
There you go.
That's where I was as a kid.
Roots.
They're your real club.
They're my real. I'm actually a Tamworth FC fan.
I'm glad you got out of that, man. But the point being is that, like, I think from a kind of wider perspective, and when you were talking about the transfer business, it kind of came to me, is that Spurs feel a bit like their halfway house. Like, they go and spend 70 million on Dominic Solanke and then bring in a couple of players who, clearly aren't ready. Look, Bergvall and Gray are excellent talents. Like absolutely no
gonna be
doubting
very,
that
very
whatsoever.
good.
They're going to be really good players. But you kind of come to that and you're thinking, well, are you going for winning a trophy right now, or are you trying to build something that you're getting these young players into the team, and like Chelsea, trying to build something like a dynasty where, you know, Chelsea look in a great position. They've also spent a lot of money, and that's fine.
They've also spent 2 years getting here.
Sure, but Spurs feel like they haven't picked a lane. And I think that that's the thing that's interesting about some of this transfer business. And you make a good point, Dougie, that they have spent money. It's not like we're sitting here pretending that they haven't. It just often feels like they haven't decided what club they want to be yet. They're kind of halfway between okay, let's bring in a load of youngsters and bed them in, and we're going to just deal with the short-term pain for some long-term gain. But at the same time, they're like, wicked, spend £70 million on Dominic Solanke and we'll win right now. Well, you can't really be both. Like, it's very difficult to do that with a limited budget. Like, albeit Spurs have spent, it doesn't feel like they have the ability to go out and spend, I don't know, £200 million in the next summer and January window together. And I think they're kind of a bit lost in terms of exactly where this squad is, because you've got someone like Son, who is coming towards the end of his career. There's a couple of experienced heads in here that you're kind of thinking they should be coming into their prime. And obviously you've got to have a blend. I'm not suggesting that everybody should pick a load of 22-year-olds up and turn it around.
Or everyone should be 30, yeah.
But like there should be a level of being like, right, if you're going to go and be like, we want to improve on last season, we want to win a trophy, we think we've got a good opportunity in the Europa League in particular, I think this season, you're kind of looking at it and thinking, go on then, go and dig into it, go and dial into that. And instead they'd be like, yeah, but what about in 3 years' time? Like, come on, just choose somewhere. And I think that's where my frustrations would lie if I supported Spurs.
Yeah, I think pick a lane is a nice way to put it. And it's confusing to watch from the outside. So it's probably really, really, really confusing when you're a fan of the club and you just can't you can't figure out what to expect because you don't know where the club's head is at. You don't know what you're supposed to expect. On one hand, you go and spend 65 million on a nice new striker. That would suggest you're going for it. And you back it up with 3 signings, age 21 and under, combined 70 odd million, you know, they'll flourish in 3 years' time. How are you supposed to feel? So this boiling over of frustration, and of course the clear and obvious divide between the Ange in crowd and the Ange out crowd can pretty much be probably explained by that.
Yeah, in terms of the clear divide, I don't know whether what would you put a percentage on in terms of, I think it's 80 Ange in, 28.
Probably.
I mean, social media is not a very good way to like take a thermostat on that.
Look, we're all influenced by our own kind of ecosystems there. Like one of my neighbours is a Spurs fan. He has an interesting name for Ange Postecoglou. It's fine. It's PG.
Okay.
It's Ange Postecoglou.
Right. Okay. That's quite good.
I think it's really clever. I don't agree, but I think it's clever. But he doesn't like it at all. And then I have 3 friends who are season ticket holders in the South Stand, and they love him. One of them though is he just likes it because he likes to bet on overs on goals, and that always comes in when Spurs play. So it's pick your poison.
Yeah.
But I think if you're in that scenario where you are picking your poison, you're probably not contenders
for sure. And remember how bad your poison's been in recent seasons as well. Like Spurs have really been in it at points. Particularly, I mean, you look at the managers they've gone for and the eras they've had, like how poisonous and miserable at times it was under Mourinho, and then how brief and unsuccessful it was under Nuno, and then Antonio Conte like eviscerating the entire ethos of the club publicly. That was a real low point. And they brought in this manager who does fit the motto of to dare is to do. And you know, the crazy high line against Chelsea last season, going down to 9 men and still playing his way, etc. It felt fresh and it felt exciting. And as a neutral, I love watching Spurs. I love it. I think at their best, they play some of the best football in the Premier League. And even when they're at their worst, it is the way they manage to lose always amuses me as well. And I want to see more of it, to be honest. So I wouldn't get rid of him.
You're not a fan of Spurs who is agonising over this, the whole thing. I tell you what, I'm going to add one more thing into the mix here because it's quite important, and I'd actually forgotten about it until this moment. We're talking about Tottenham setting the table on expectations and confusing fans as to what they should expect. When really, a really important part of this is the fact that what did Ange Postecoglou say just a couple of months ago?
Always win trophies in my second season.
He said, I always win a trophy in my second season. And it is his second season. So maybe like some of the wrath that he's feeling right now, due to the inconsistent performances, due to the fact that they can look so drab at times. There's an element of bringing that on yourself when you do say something like that, even if he meant it in jest or only half serious.
He doesn't really do that many jokes. I think he's really known as this jovial character. I don't see that many jokes from him. I think he's deadly serious.
Yeah, and the fact that he sort of clapped back with that in a way, maybe that has set the table, and in a way that he probably didn't necessarily mean to. Maybe he was just responding to a bit of pressure and a bit of questioning there, as if to say, like, look, I've won tons of trophies, and then made a bit of a quip and then thought, oh no,
that's going to stick with me.
Yeah,
it's a bit like when Trent last season won the Carabao Cup and put like 1 out of 4 on his Instagram story. Like, people remember that stuff.
People do, yes. Words carry a heavy weight, and so with Postecoglou there, maybe he has made a rod for his own back with some of the fans. He increased those expectations, and those that didn't like him, predisposed not to like him, now watch some of these performances and think, well, you said that we'd be winning a trophy. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. The trophy thing is really interesting in terms of judging Spurs solely on that, because the era they're in has to be taken into account. Man City side, up until this season, have been pretty impervious for like 7 years. Well, they won 6 Premier League titles. They won a domestic treble, a European treble. There's been Klopp's Liverpool's thrown in there. Even
sure, Man United won 2 trophies in this time. Like, if they can win 2 trophies, then you would expect Spurs to be like, hang on, we are at least as good as Eric Ten Hag's Manchester United, and I think they'd have a case.
Yeah, true. But are Spurs the weird Man City kryptonite that Man United were? Sometimes it's maybe they should just appoint Solskjaer. But that was the missing trick. They should have appointed Solskjaer. He would have got them a trophy.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, though. I think football should be more than just trophies. Maybe I say that as a Sunderland fan who's not seen a lot of joy.
I agree, Dougie. I think you're absolutely
Fulham
right.
will definitely agree.
You have to say that, otherwise you cry yourself to sleep.
But I think there's clearly signs that they are doing a lot right. Are they doing a lot right quick enough to close the gap on Europe and the Premier League's elite? Potentially not at the moment. So I can understand why there's questions about it. Would I sack Ange Postecoglou? Absolutely not. Should he be under pressure? Should he be under scrutiny? Yeah, you can scrutinise it for sure.
Of course. I asked myself the question here, would anybody else get anything better out of Tottenham? And if the diagnosis here is that it's a young, inexperienced, and therefore quite volatile squad, it doesn't matter who's in charge. Young, inexperienced players are inconsistent by nature. That is the way it goes. And they did nothing in the summer to rectify this. They added a nice striker, but then they just basically funneled in more very impressive, but obviously naturally inconsistent young players who haven't really had much of an impact. They didn't take that step. So does anyone get a more consistent tune out of the team? Probably not. It's a matter of ironing those creases out over time and allowing those players to mature into a team. There is a risk, obviously, that means that part way through that project, in inverted commas, that someone like Son comes to the end of his tenure at Tottenham, declines to the point where he's no longer a pivotal player, and they kind of miss that window, having already missed the Harry Kane window, which again gets very frustrating. Like I do get it, but this is a club who are not looking to rush along, seemingly. Judging by their actions, judging by their business, they're not in a massive hurry to get right to the top. They're happy with a relative step-by-step progression, and they're happy with the brand of football that Postecoglou is charming out of the players. And we agree, when it hits, it's the best in the league.
I would also say, you talk about the Harry Kane era, you talk about the Son era. I think there's another player that could carry the next era, and that's Dejan Kulusevski. I think he's been insanely good so far this season. Yeah. And there are a number of other players that could get up to best in the Premier League level, or amongst the best in the Premier League. You look at James Maddison on his day. I know it's a little too inconsistent still, which is frustrating, but James Maddison on his day has got to be in the conversation. Pedro Porro, if Trent Alexander-Arnold leaves, looks like he's going to be one of the outstanding right-backs. Destiny Dougie, we've already talked about. Dominic Solanke on his day, a top 5-6 Premier League striker as well. There are players to get very, very excited about for not just 2-3 years' time. I think very soon it could be special.
It could be, yeah. It could be. And some of those players are very, very good now, as you say. Kulusevski is incredible. But unfortunately for them right now, the balance is a bit off. There's probably 3 outstanding players and then, 7 or 8, which are like, these are looking pretty good.
Yeah.
And for some fans, they need more and they need it sooner. But for others, they're just going to...
I'd add Van der Ven in there as well, when fit.
So if we can get Van der Ven a hamstring transplant... when you mentioned the 10 games, the start of the season last season where they rose to the top of the table, Van der Ven was fit for all of those. And then from the 10th game, that's when his hamstring goes. They lose half their games without him. 50%, genuinely. I've done the numbers. They lose 50% of their games without him, which is not good enough at all. But, would Liverpool lose half their games without Van Dijk? Not quite, but you know what I mean. It would be a really, really big problem. So to some extent, they have my sympathies there as well. But it's part of the game, and you have to crack on. Everybody gets it.
Got to ride it out.
Yeah, there you go. Jack, you've been suspiciously quiet on Postecoglou, who I know that you are a massive fan of. Is it because we did a good enough job?
Yeah. Genuinely. Yeah. That's why I haven't
giving him credit.
No, I think two things can be true, right? So you kind of come to that point where we're expressing where we are with Tottenham, and I'm with Dougie. I think you can criticise and you can put him under scrutiny. I wouldn't sack him. I think he is the best man for the job at Spurs right now. But equally, I think do I think the transfer business has been good enough to propel Spurs forward in a serious and major way? No. Do I also think that they have performed to the best of their ability with the squad that they have this season? Also no. So there can be question marks over the way they're being used. And I think what was interesting was you said, is there someone who could do a better job? And my hunch is no also. But I do think that there's probably two sides to that coin. Are there managers who at 2-0 up and two slightly fortunate goals, so that they get kind of handed by Chelsea, there's still work to do, but there are, these are handed to them. Does a manager who is a little bit more pragmatic shut up shop a bit more, not necessarily invite everyone on, but maybe play a tad more in transition and not leave the spaces for a Chelsea side who we know are unbelievable in transition to tear them apart in those areas? Yes, but to the same question, would that same manager get you a 4-0 win away at City? Yeah. Would that same manager win 3-0 away at Old Trafford? Probably not. So you've got to kind of pick your lane as well. We tell Spurs to pick a lane.
This is we're getting into like the personality of a squad, and you are who you are. And you can't just turn elements of it off, because that would erode your own personality. Unfortunately, I'm going to do it. I'm going to have to talk about the Detroit Lions again. Sorry, everyone. But the reason I do it is because the Detroit Lions coach, Dan Campbell, keeps going for it on 4th down, even when it's really risky. And everyone in the national media in America is questioning it and saying he's a gambler. And he keeps telling everyone, I can't just turn it off, right? It's a tap and it's on and I'm aggressive. I'm not a gambler, I'm aggressive. Our personality is we go for it. We go for it.
So you're managed by the Ange of the NFL.
Well, unrelenting. No. Let me sit on that comparison. There's probably a better one. But he's like, you can't just be like super aggressive up front, go for it, and then right at the last second just pull back again. Like you are who you are, and if you don't go full throttle, it will erode your personality. And I really feel like with Ange, and there are other managers out there that do this too, but with Ange, it is an all or nothing, and it has to be all or nothing. Otherwise, you don't get it all. You just get nothing.
That's very poetic. That's beautiful. Nearly brought a tear to my eye. No, I totally get what you mean. It is.
Thanks,
it's a mad situation to be in. I don't know whether you only get nothing if you don't give it all the time, though. I don't know. I'd have to see it in action. I'd have to see it in action because I just haven't really seen him try and do Ange ball to 70%.
Is it possible?
Is it possible?
Yeah. Is it even possible?
This is the question.
We don't know. Well, look, what we do know is the players seem to be broadly still in favour of Ange Postecoglou's style. Like, they seem to enjoy it. They appreciate its flaws, and who knows how patient they'll be. But
did you see the Christian Romero quotes?
What were they?
So Christian Romero basically came out and was like, to Telemundo in Spanish, so it was slightly different in that regard, but he came out and basically was like, sometimes coaches go, sometimes players go, but the person at the top stays the same, and that's why Spurs are stuck in a cycle. And you're like, oh, you just called out your chairman publicly, but without naming him. And then Christian Romero retweeted something on Twitter that basically was like, this is a sign to say that Romero will leave if Levy sacks Ange. And then he quite swiftly unretweeted it, but he was there to see for a bit. And I was like, wow, he has not lost his dressing room. And actually, you know what? That's probably quite important in a moment like this, I think.
Agreed. And it also, Antonio Conte sat there somewhere in Naples just grinning, isn't he? Just absolutely smiling after that big outburst, talking about, the structural failings of Tottenham and listing through all the managers they've had and how they've had no success and how it can't possibly be down to the managers. Well, Christian Romero agrees.
Yeah.
There
I also
you
think,
go.
footballers have a limited amount of time. Well, they don't have a limited amount of time. They've probably got a limited amount of interest in collecting the opinions of the masses, as it were. But I'm sure they do listen to the key sound bites from the biggest commentators in the game. And it was notable after the match on Sunday, Jamie Carragher particularly focusing most criticism on Daniel Levy. And that will filter through to the players. So I've got no doubts that Christian Romero's Instagram, Twitter activity is motivated, and players do listen to the opinions of the most respected pundits in the game.
Well, there you go. We started off as a podcast about Ange Postecoglou and finished up as a podcast about Daniel Levy. Good for the Tottenham fans, maybe not good for the neutrals. I hope you all stuck with us all the way through that one, but that is the end of this pod. Could be Mbappe week next week.
Bring it on.
Interesting. Yeah, a bit of continental flavour and branch out from the Premier League. We've been very Premier League focused, but that's kind of where the interest is at the moment. It's where our jobs are focused right now. But next time, we'll have a good one.
Absolutely,
hopefully.
Yeah.
And,
could be another topic in Atalanta as well.
I was going to say, the truth is Gasperini the best pound-for-pound manager in Europe.
There we go.
Now, there is a manager who does not always command his dressing room because some players really don't like him. Anyway, podcast for another time. Dougie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, Sam.
Jack, thanks for all your input.
Always a pleasure, Samuel.
And thank you all for listening. We will see you next time.
The Champions League, Copa Libertadores, the World Cup. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's home ground. Select Quote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, while Select Quote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. And have you ever worried about getting coverage with pre-existing health conditions? Select Quote partners with carriers that provide policies for a variety of health conditions. High blood pressure, diabetes, done your ACL? No problem. Select Quote partners with carriers that can cover those conditions and loads of others. Or, if you don't have any major health issues, they work with carriers that can get you same-day coverage with no medical exam required. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/ranks. Go to selectquote.com/ranks today to get started. That's selectquote.com/ranks. The Champions League, Copa Libertadores, the World Cup. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's home ground. Select Quote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, while Select Quote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. And have you ever worried about getting coverage with pre-existing health conditions? Select Quote partners with carriers that provide policies for a variety of health conditions. High blood pressure, diabetes, done your ACL? No problem. Select Quote partners with carriers that can cover those conditions and loads of others. Or, if you don't have any major health issues, they work with carriers that can get you same-day coverage with no medical exam required. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/ranks. Go to selectquote.com/ranks today to get started. That's selectquote.com/ranks.